Now, if you speak about India as a civilizational state, as a state which is conscious not only of her long heritage, alive to her culture, alive and trying to rediscover and restate her huge spiritual repository, a civilizational state is also conscious about its duty towards its citizens. And that citizenship need not only be defined by the Constitution, it has to be defined through something which is, which for any other terminology we call culture, but it has to be defined through culture also. So if we had promised, if we had made a promise, and if you realize, you see the descriptions that Amal makes of the situation of the refugees at that point of time, and Sri Aurobindo repeatedly asking what is their condition and what kind of succor are they being provided, then at least I have come to the conclusion that we are on the right track. And this was a long pending issue which needed to be addressed, which needed to be for once and all, for once it had to be completely addressed and closed and shut. You couldn't leave this chapter open forever. The issue is whether we recognize that there was this problem. The other characteristic is that you identify that there are problems which need to be addressed and not brushed under the carpet. So it's very interesting that if you look at his position on Pakistan, on Sri Aurobindo's position on Pakistan, of course I don't want to mention this where he says I don't want Pakistan to endure. His position on Pakistan, his use of the word that Pakistan was created by force and fraud, very strong words. And when you realize that a nation is created by force and fraud, and its only cementing factor is anti-Indianness, in the long run you realize that it becomes a liability for the globe, for our Committee of Nations, in the Committee of Nations as a whole. Now, there was, I think, a feeling that unity has not been achieved. Well, Sri Aurobindo himself says that unity will come, unity is bound to come, but its structure, its dimension may be anything. Sitting today, I think it's very difficult for us to try and delineate the framework of that unity or that reunification. But certainly if you read his letters on Pakistan occupied Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, and it's fascinating. I mean, sitting in that room there for 26 years, the kind of phenomenal perception that he had. And I think it was to Sudhir Ghosh that Kennedy said when Sudhir Ghosh gave him the ideal of human unity, and in that chapter where Sri Aurobindo talks about how communist China is going to overrun and come up to the gateway of India, overrun Tibet. So Kennedy told Sudhir Ghosh that, there must be a mistake with the date. So Sudhir Ghosh said, no, this was written in 1949, 1950. And it was written by Sri Aurobindo, who never left his room. And so he replied, saying that you mean to say here was somebody who lived 26 years, 25 years in a room, never left that, and this is what he wrote? And your Prime Minister tells us to be non-aligned today? So you see his perception and you realize that, well, Pakistan occupied Kashmir was very much an issue. So I say that let's go one step at a time. So the mother's flag was hoisted when Article 370 was abrogated. The mother's flag was hoisted on the ashram main building. So now the next step is, perhaps if you ask me, Sri Aurobindo and the future of India, that is the recovery of Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Pakistan occupied Kashmir, Kashmir ceded to China also. And very interestingly, you realize that the Janasang's manifesto, right from the early days, the reason why Janasangh was formed, because in his letter, when K.M. Munshi writes to Sri Aurobindo saying, I want to work for the reintegration of Indian culture under modern conditions, Sri Aurobindo says That is the work that needs to be done. And let us not make bones about, somebody has written, K. Munshi wrote, I want to work for the reintegration of Hindu culture under modern conditions. Sri Aurobindo wrote back saying, reintegration of Indian culture under modern conditions. Let's not make too much of it. There was a generation, there are, what Sri Aurobindo represents is that Indianness in the Hinduness at the deeper level. So that's like kind of nitpicking. So when K. Munshi is writing this to Sri Aurobindo is replying that reintegration of Indian culture under modern conditions. Regarding Pakistan occupied Kashmir, Sri Aurobindo says that there was a clear probability that we could have taken back what we had lost, but because of the ceasefire. And then when you come down to 1971, 18th December, just after the Bangladesh ceasefire, Mother says it's not going to happen this way. It's not going to be through a war anymore. This was the last chance. But, we signed the Shimla Pact and we gave back 93,000 prisoners of war. Bhutto took us for a ride. And Mother said this is not going to happen this way. But I clearly see that Pakistan is going to break apart. You are recording, I am not advocating the breaking apart of Pakistan. Mother says Pakistan is going to break apart. 18 December 1971, agenda, it is there in the Rebirth of India, quoted by Michel Danino also. You can check. And that is one conversation that I keep reading. So she was very clear. Because she was very clear that still 71, you still had a chance through a conventional warfare. Pakistan had not resorted to terrorism at that point of time. Both of us did not have the nuclear weapon. 75, 74, we got the nuclear weapon. They started theirs. And increasingly in 1998, we both became nuclear weapon states. So a conventional warfare in that sense became difficult. You see, this, Mother broadly said this is not going to be possible again. But obviously, if you look at it the other way, last year, after Balakot, we pulled the plug on, even after the surgical strike, and after Balakot, we pulled the plug on nuclear blackmail. So, in a sense, it's very interesting that we are emerging as a very confident nation. There is a tremendous churning within because there is a tremendous pressure on trying to rediscover who we ourselves are. I'll come to that later. Because 70 years there was a tremendous amount of suppression. Because you had to be correct in certain aspects. You had to be politically correct. And therefore, if you spoke about your inheritance, if you spoke about your parampara, if you spoke about your roots, you were. And if you wrote about it, you were not published, you were not recognized as mainstream. That was a phenomenon which started from the 60s onward. I'll come to that. But coming back to Pakistan and to POK. So I think there is a very clear case. When Sri Aurobindo talks about reunification of India, let us have it step by step. And when the ultimate reunification is there, that is the ideal. How that will happen, when that will happen. But let us not say if it has not happened in our lifetime, so it's a failure. After all, what is our lifetime? As Jugalda would say, we are like comme un bouchon ballotté par les vagues. We are like corks on the sea. Waves are coming and pushing us around. Not in our lifetime, but the larger unity. So, POK, recovery, and that's why Mother put up that clear injunction where she said that this flag is going to be hoisted whenever India recovers parts of herself in the future. So that recovery of parts of herself is an unfinished agenda. It is happening. And one of the major steps in 70 years was abrogation of Article 370. We integrated, cemented further that integration which was legitimately ours. And so therefore, now when you go up and look at, when you go down and look at the map of, spiritual map of India, some would call it Akhand Bharat, spiritual map of India, tell yourself that yes, the lion is intact. It is now completely integrated. A portion of it still remains. If this could happen, even that will happen. So this. Now, you may have some questions, we can perhaps answer that later. Now there's a very interesting passage that in 1918, Sri Aurobindo writes in 1918, the Arya was then being published, and he says, in the stupendous rush of change which is coming on the human world as a result of the present tornado of upheaval, ancient India's culture, attacked by European modernism, overpowered in the material field, betrayed by the indifference of her children, may perish forever along with the soul of the nation that holds it in its keeping. Betrayed by the indifference of her children. There is a fundamental question that we need to ask ourselves. I did my, can I say, I did my, no, I mean, it's nothing, it's not, I did my PhD on education, in the national education movement. It's not that it's a batch, I just had a fascination. One of the former vice chancellor and minister asked me, why are you doing a PhD on Sri Aurobindo? Do you want a job? I said, no. Ever since childhood, I had a fascination, I want to do a PhD on him. That is why. He just, he gave me such a dirty look. I said, okay. So, so it's, and you see this, he's saying in 1918. And this was in 1918. And in December 1948, his last message to Andhra University. This is what he said in 1918. And in December 1948, message to Andhra University, there are deeper issues for India herself. Since by following certain tempting directions, she may conceivably become a nation like many others, evolving an opulent industry and commerce, a powerful organization of social and political life, an immense military strength, practicing power politics with a high degree of success, guarding and extending zealously her gains and her interests, dominating even a large part of the world, but in this apparently magnificent progression forfeiting its swadharma, losing its soul, then ancient India and her spirit might disappear altogether, and we would have only one more nation like the others, and that would be a real gain neither to the world nor to us. It would be a tragic irony of fate if India were to throw away her spiritual heritage at the very moment when in the rest of the world there is more and more a turning towards her for spiritual help and a saving light. This must not and will surely not happen, but it cannot be said that the danger is not there. This is quintessential Sri Aurobindo. This cannot, but surely will not happen, but it cannot be said that the danger is not there. So 1918 to 1948. Please reflect. Now, and why I mentioned I did that, the question is, let us ask ourselves, post 1947, in the last 70 years, has our education system been responsive to this, to removing that indifference and to ensuring that we do not forsake India's civilizational swadharma? I don't see a reflection of that in the education system in the last 70 years that has been thrust upon. Neither was there a total overhauling of the education system. Neither did the government of Free India think it necessary to come out and reach out to all these institutions that grew out of our organic sense and experience, like Vishwabharati, and Mother had already initiated the Center of Education in 1943 in a sense. And in 1950-51, it was a purely private initiative. And in fact, if you look at Dilip Kumar Roy's letter to Nehru written at that time, that there has to be some inquiries instituted in the ashram. So don't worry, it's been going on since then. Don't worry. Dilip Kumar Roy's letter also.